Welcome to Cash Flow and Tell, the podcast that uncovers answers to your toughest questions about growing your business from a working capital perspective. Hosted by the people of Fun Through, we dive into real stories and lessons from CEOs, finance pros, and business owners just like you. Today, we're covering how to make a great first hire and build a thriving company culture. Now, here's your host, Helen Shacklett, Senior Growth Manager at Fun Through, joined by today's guest, Shawn Hewat, CEO and co-founder at Wavy.
To explore everything you need to know about making a first hire and building your company culture, I'm excited to sit down with Shawn Hewat. She's the CEO and co-founder of Wavy. So welcome to the podcast, Shawn. How are you doing today?
I'm so good. Thank you for having me.
Likewise, definitely. Tell us a little bit about Wavy and your growth journey so far. I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the co-founder and CEO of Wavy. We actually started the company in 2019, right before that little thing called COVID. And we initially started it as a passion project. We wanted to help groups of people find great experiences to connect with. That ultimately turned into corporate experiences. And as we dug into the world of team building and employee engagement, thought there was a lot that we could improve and started helping corporate teams get their people together through really high quality, really great events. A couple months into that journey, COVID hit and the world of team building and just how we connect as people changed quite a bit. So we thought, let's take all of that research and time and love we've put into great experiences and bring it into the online world. Teams are going to be distributed going forward. How do we help them still connect and get to know each other more than like a face and a name on Slack? We still need to be connected to each other. So we launched a full marketplace of team building events that expanded into well-being and mental health focused events, leadership development, arts, cooking, DEI training, you name it. And all of a sudden we were working with hundreds of teams around the world. We used this to gain insights on where companies and leaders were struggling with engaging their teams. What started as fun team building events turned into us building tooling and features to help leaders run better employee programming and get a better pulse on what's driving engagement and what's not. So years later, heading into 2026, we actually now exist as a culture insights platform. Essentially, Wavy helps leaders centralize, automate, and measure the real impact that all their people programming is having. Anything from like a town hall to an onboarding session to leadership training, an annual kickoff, we've sales kickoffs, socials, hub events, and more. Anything that lives on the calendar, you sync to Wavy, and we give you real-time insights and data on, is this actually making an impact? Who's engaging? Who's not? Is all of this budget and time going to good use? And is there anything you can change now instead of waiting for your annual engagement survey? So coming on here today to talk about culture and hiring and talent, this is the world I live and breathe. So it's fitting. And that's a little bit on how Wavy's evolved over the years.
No, that's fascinating. I will say that sounds like that's one of the good things that come out of COVID, right? Is Wavy. And what you uniquely bring to the table, it's really taking the fluffiness out of culture programming. I love that.
Yeah, thank you.
So before we dive in, tell us the story about your first hire at Wavy. So how you knew you were ready, the role, how you chose the right candidate, and how it worked out.
Our first hire was because we had launched this team building offering. And we kind of put it out there as a feeler. This was spring 2020. 3 co-founders were working on the business. So we were really the first employees or first hires. But then we put these experiences out there and started getting bookings from corporate teams. And that led to a referral to another team and another booking from the one customer who referred us to another customer. All of a sudden, we were getting referred across HR communities, not just in North America, around the world. And we were completely overwhelmed with demand, which I think is a really good trigger for looking at not just your first hire, but building out your initial team. Is there something you really can't meet from a capacity perspective? Or are we blocking ourselves from growth because we're too strapped for resources? So, the 3 of us were working on the business. could we do way more in business and sales if we had more people in here? So our first hire was customer facing. We really needed help on managing our event bookings, our partnerships, making sure customers had a great experience with Wavy and were coming back for more. And we had someone who was ready to jump in and do project-based work with us. So that's how we ended up bringing them on board. And after their first couple of months with us as a contractor, we thought, oh, we can't operate without you. We need to bring you on board now. Once we started working with hundreds of teams, that's when we decided, all right, we're going to need another developer in here to help build out the technology and another customer success person to make sure we've got a fantastic experience. We've always been very customer obsessed at Wavy.
That makes sense. I mean, you're people obsessed, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the funny part about like building and just navigating the waters that is building a startup is a lot of our customers and advisors and investors are in the people and culture space as well. So there are so many people, maybe you get too much advice sometimes as a startup founder, but there are so many people in the talent, HR, people and culture space that we can tap on to say, hey, we're doing this. What do you think? Or what are your best practices for this? So have gotten a lot of helpful advice and resources along the way.
So speaking of that, what do you think is the most valuable piece of advice that you got in regard to your first hire?
For us, the first hire was a no-brainer. It was, hey, we literally cannot meet this demand. And we were building our technology alongside our customer growth. So it's not like we were out there building something and shopping it around for customers. It was we were bombarded by customers and needed to build better systems to support them. That's how Wavy's growth journey went. So it was more, when we built out our vision for this culture OS and analytics product and raised some seed funding, how do we navigate from there? And I think some of the really good advice that we got, maybe after making some mistakes, we hired a bit too quickly and didn't yet have the demand or capacity for it post seed raise, was what's breaking in your business? Are there certain processes or areas that are completely broken because you're under capacity? Can you bring people on that can start with a project or contract-based work before going full-time? And that's ended up being a way that we've brought a lot of people on board, and people who are still have been with us for over 4 years followed this path. Hey, we really need to solve this specific problem. Would you be up for doing, a 3-month contract or just a project with us to prove it out, to see how it goes, and then hiring them full-time from there? That style of bringing people on board to a scrappy, growing startup, I think is great. If someone's coming in and you're, pre-seed stage or maybe you haven't even raised funding and they go, I want the Shopify experience, you're not going to be able to offer that as a very small team. So someone who's like, no problem. I love the space you're building in. I think I have what it takes. Oh, starting with like a project or two and I'll just come in and prove my worth. That's a great indicator that will be the generalist and like can do attitude that you need in the early stages of building.
Kind of just generalizing this a bit for the audience. It was really obvious the trigger for you about when to hire. You had all this demand you had to deal with. It's a great problem to have. Mm-hmm. But for other folks kind of considering, is it time yet? Do you have any indicators, framework signs to know when you're ready to hire financially or otherwise?
Mm-hmm. Well, if I'm going to like go a bit higher level, I think something interesting has happened over the last 5 years in the tech ecosystem and specifically in like the venture-backed startup ecosystem. I'd say in 2021, which is when we initially fundraised, a big indicator of your success was, oh, how many people do you have? Oh, you've been building your startup. How many people do you have? And the bigger, the better, because it was the indicator of success. And now in the age of AI and tons of Gen AI startups coming to life, it's actually the opposite. Oh, we're doing X million a year and actually only 3 people. And you can do a lot more with less. So I think that's changed a little bit in that when I used to give advice a few years ago to people in the early stages of building, how do we know when we need to make our first hire? I think I'd be more forward, like building out your team and that being like a good indicator of success. And now I'm like, well, why do you need to hire them? Can't you do this yourself? have you tried automating this process first? What will the impact be to the business if you do bring them on board? Is it going to really streamline things so you can take on more customers? Are they going to help us open up a new market? Are they building a feature set that's going to increase account size or bring in additional revenue or open up a completely new customer segment? Like, what's the real business case for bringing that person on board? And it depends on what your financial situation is as a business. If you're profitable or bootstrapped or resource limited, try as a contractor project first to validate that you really do need to bring this on board. Maybe you don't even need a full-time headcount. Maybe you just need someone helping 5 to 10 hours a week, and that unlocks whatever you're trying to do with the business. So that's the way I typically talk to earlier stage founders about it today, but it has changed quite a bit, just in general in the tech landscape.
No, it is kind of crazy that now the flex is I can do so much without the headcount,
Yeah.
right? You kind of covered the question of full-time employee, contractor, fractional, but how would you suggest setting the level of seniority for that first person and really just overall the type of role that you should hire for?
It's really going to depend on what does your founding team look like? Where are the gaps? And, what area of the business is it going to be? In general at Wavy, we have quite a lean team, and we've been focused on bringing more intermediate senior folks on board who have great experience. They're still eager to grow, but can accomplish quite a bit because of the level of experience and grit that they have. I think a lot of times founders will bring early employees on board and give them a head of or VP title, perhaps a bit too early. It's better to go generalist, and then as the company grows and the team grows and you need to bring more structure in, then to start to look at title promotions and general promotions. But I'd go more manager or lead level rather than head of or director of or VP of, even if it's a one-person department. Just better to see how they grow and how they take ownership and leadership as the company grows. What's great in a startup is if things progress quickly, leadership opportunities and growth opportunities also progress quickly, but you don't want to start at the ceiling and then have nowhere to go from there. It always feels a bit funny because as a founder, your title's often CEO or CTO, and maybe you're a 4-person team. So there's that separation there. But I think just being an open book and being honest with your team about that it's a good way to approach it.
That really provides more opportunities to that person as the company grows. So it really benefits them and you in the end, it sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of on the heels of that, what are some top mistakes that either you've made or you've seen others founders make in a first hire?
I think to what we just spoke to, I think our first hire was head of their division. And then as we grew to a team of 10, there was some growing pains and okay, well, what does our actual org structure look like? And, we're not at the size that we need leveling in place, but it does create a bit of tension in the 10th hire versus the first hire. I think what I'd do going forward or what advice I'd give to other founders would be there's other ways you can set that up for a first hire, equity or option pool wise, just culture, level of transparency that you give them in the business, growth opportunity, rather than giving that in the get-go. But I was also pretty green to the space and first time building a company. I'd worked at startups previously, but never started one of my own. So I think you kind of have to make some of these mistakes going through. And then I think the second big learning in the topic of hiring was we raised a pretty great pre-seed round in 2021. Every single investor and other founder that we talked to said, "Oh my God, congrats. How big is your team?" So I thought, oh, let's go hire a full team. And we grew to about 15 people, and we didn't yet have the demand and product market fit that we needed to warrant all of those roles. So we did have to make some adjustments into how we operated. And at the same time, the landscape was completely changing. Political turmoil and lots of changes in the world and employee engagement and HR and lots of changes in tech, who was mostly our clients. I think Shopify did the big round of layoffs in 2022, and all of technology continued to follow suit, even through to today with restructuring and layoffs. So it wasn't a great time to all of a sudden have tripled our team when our customer base was struggling. So I wouldn't say it was a mistake, but if I was to do it again, I would hire in a bit of a different way where we really have validated the need for each role. We know exactly what the goal is and what impact we want this role to have on the business and have it be really measurable, whether that's like a cost center or a revenue goal, and then just take a bit more time with it. We went really quickly because you feel like you need to. But I think if we just paused and planned a bit more intentionally and really made sure we had that demand and product market fit and ideal customer profile much more validated, maybe it would have happened a bit differently. But all of these things kind of informed how we run and operate as a business today. So it's not like I have a lot of regret, just I've learned a ton over the last 6 years in building Wavy.
As long as you learn, that's what matters. I mean, you could do everything right, and then some circumstance changes, and suddenly things are not going how you thought. So that's just kind of par for the course. And what's interesting is other guests that I've had on podcasts have hit on this same theme, that you have to decide for yourself what success looks like. You can't listen to what someone else tells you what scaling or being a great business looks like.
Yeah. Yeah. And hiring over, like, as businesses have gone distributed and remote friendly, it's kind of been the wild, wild west. Like, a lot of my networks in the talent and HR space, and just hearing from talent acquisition leaders on what they're dealing with at scale with scams and identity checking and making sure that people really are who they say they are, and how do we know if they're working at 3 other organizations? Like, it's been a huge learning for all companies. We've dealt with it a couple times, and one time someone wasn't who they said they were and had to quickly action and let them go. It happens, hiring remotely and quickly scaling. So we've certainly had some situations happen there too.
So, okay, I'm so curious. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened with that story behind what happened with that employee who was working at a bunch of places?
We just, onboarded them, and we pretty quickly just realized that a few things weren't as honest as we thought they were, and there was just some fishy behavior happening. And we work with a HR advisor and kind of brought the situation to them, and based on a series of check-ins that we did and trying to communicate with them and the advice from our HR advisor, we just shut it down pretty quickly. And you also have to have these things ready to go, or at least have someone you can go to for advice should issues arise if you're hiring people. So we ended up having to shut down all of their accounts, send them a termination notice, process the last payroll. It wasn't like they were with us for a long time, but we just followed that checklist that our advisor helped us with really quickly and made sure we communicated very clearly and followed everything they said we needed to do. But it was disappointing for sure. It felt like we wasted a few weeks there, and we're pretty excited to bring a great candidate on board. But I'm not the only one who's had this story, and I know for bigger tech companies that are getting thousands of applicants and building really large teams, like, this is a huge, huge issue that they're working on today.
Shawn, I think you're reading my mind, because that really is a great segue into something I was wondering about, just handling the HR side of things. So like you said, that verification, employment contracts, payroll providers. What's your advice for handling all of that?
You definitely want to have your legal side of things in order before starting to hire a team. And if you're an early stage founder listening to this, like, that means for you too. You need all of your incorporation docs and your founder agreement, your shareholders agreement, directors. You need your own separate employment agreements. Like, that has to be organized before you're ready to make your first hire. And making sure you've got a great either contract employment agreement or full-time employment agreement ready to go, and that you've had someone in HR or someone in legal help to create that. Because if you don't have good agreements in place, you're just putting yourself at risk. And believe me, legal action and issues happen way more often than you think. So don't hire unless you've spent the time to get those things organized. There are some good templates, especially for like a contract employment agreement. It's a little less risky. But yeah, I would have that in place. If you're hiring someone full-time, you also need to have some of these HR things covered. Like you need to have a payroll provider. Typically your fractional like accounting finance person handles this. Ours still does today, like handles our payroll and all that fun stuff. Unless you're doing complete independent contractor agreements and you're just going to send via e-transfer and have a invoice in your inbox each month, that's pretty simple. But as soon as you want someone to be a full-time employee, you have to have a few other things in place.
What advice do you have for successfully onboarding someone once you've made the hire and really setting them up for long-term success?
You know, at Wavy, we are very transparent, like radically transparent. So if you're working with us, we're going to treat you like an adult. We're going to be an open book all the way down to the bank account balance. Everything we communicate with our board and investors, if you're working for us, you're going to get that information too. Especially, you know, being a smaller team or being an earlier stage startup, I think the more you can bring people in on the vision, mission, direction, be as clear as possible on where you're heading, what challenges you're facing, what's going well, and really help them like be part of the inner circle, they'll have so much more ownership and they'll care so much more about their day-to-day work. People need 3 things to be super high performing. They need to feel connected to the vision and mission of the company. They need to be connected to the purpose of their day-to-day work. Why does my work matter? What is it leading towards? And then they need to be connected to each other. Like, Helen, if we were working together, I'd need you to be more than a face and a name on Slack. Otherwise, I'm not going to do good work with you. And if you can enable those like 3 C's, those 3 connection points, you're going to have a high performing team. And it's funny because like this is what we help our clients do too. So we have to practice it internally. And there's certainly always been like a high standard for how we build our own culture. And, you know, I think one thing on the transparency front that I've always said to my team and our like wider ecosystem is like, I'm learning this for the first time too. Not that, you know, our team doesn't take leadership and set the vision and direction, but like I've certainly done certain things well and certain things not well and have evolved over time. But I think the style in which we work today, like a few of our team members have worked with us for over 4 years, and that's a lifetime in the world of startups. So, and even those who don't maybe are in new opportunities today or have transitioned to other things, we still keep in touch with and still have great connection with. So that's been the focus for us.
And that is quite an accomplishment to have people stick around for 4+ years. They're definitely happy. Yeah. So kind of building on that, actually, you talked a little bit about the culture at Wavy, but are there any more aspects of the culture that you think are worth highlighting? And I would love to hear about how you think the culture you've built has influenced your growth trajectory.
We've always described our kind of brand and brand identity and culture as like high quality goofs. So we do have a little bit of silly, goofy fun during work. I mean, part of our platform is a marketplace that teams can book fun or learning or leadership development events. So we've had the pleasure of being able to test out and be the guinea pigs for hundreds of those experiences. So that's been a nice perk for our culture. But we've also been intentional to do little things along the way, like asynchronous cooking challenges where someone shares a recipe and we all have a week to cook it, and then come to our next all hands with the picture of our dish as the background, and you have to present it as a chef. Like, we've certainly worked in kind of funny things within there. But I'd say the rituals we always stick to is like, we start the week with our weekly wave, everyone getting together and aligning on what we want to accomplish for the week. We've got different kind of functional stand-ups and syncs. We do an asynchronous update on Fridays, no internal meetings on Fridays, so you can have a flow day. We've been very liberal on hours and vacation. You know, we're clear on what we have to accomplish, so that's our goalpost for success, not time spent at your computer. That doesn't really matter to us. We all work in very different ways. And then like the radical transparency part. I just had a board meeting this week, and then after that in our weekly wave, walked everyone through the exact same slides I walked our board through. And if anyone ever has questions, I'm an open door. So I think that that's something that we really shifted as we had to reduce our team and operate in a leaner way and work towards our profitability goal, which we've now reached. So I think that change, thank you, that change in what our culture feels like and how we speak to each other and the information we share has gone a really long way. And I encourage founders to follow that same level if they can.
Wavy is an example of a really thriving culture. So, if you had to synthesize your advice for building a culture that really brings out the best in people, what would that be?
Yeah, I mean, I think as leaders, we can influence culture. But my favorite definition of the word is that culture is the sum of your 100 most recent interactions with a company or organization. So it's kind of just the way work and collaborating feels. Like if we're a leadership team or a people team and things you're putting on or processes you're setting in place are going to influence that, there's some really great ways you can think about it. If your team is distributed, I think you have to think about a variety of rituals and practices that are going to help people feel connected to each other despite not always being in the same place. Maybe you bring the team together like FunThrough does for a team week twice a year, but what's happening in between that to make sure people feel connected to the company, the work they're doing, and the people, and getting really intentional about that. Not having the same format all the time goes a long way. So, you're going to have your monthly town hall. That's important. There are ways you can make it more engaging than others. But are there different opportunities for people to connect and learn together, to have fun together? Are there asynchronous rituals happening in like your team and Slack? Because one remote day can be pretty isolating. 5 days a week can be even more so. And if people aren't feeling the community and connection, they're not going to do as great a job. I think sometimes people may call some of these things fluff, but even the way you follow up on a town hall or get feedback after or provide just opportunities for connection, they make a huge difference in what it feels like to work at your company.
So, you described really well what a great company culture looks like. I'm kind of curious if you could elaborate on ones you've seen that are not so great. And for each of these, what was the effect on the company performance?
Yeah, I mean, especially looking across our clients, we're either like working with culture, people obsessed companies that have a lot of programming going on and want better insights or data or want to improve it even more. A lot of our customers fit into that category. Sometimes we get ones that go, look, we need help. We had to do a huge restructure, or we did a merger and acquisition, or we've had this big leadership change happen and morale feels off, or we're feeling really disconnected. I think change management has a big influence on how culture feels. It's going to shift things. Big example over the last 3 years has been layoffs and restructurings. It kind of bursts the trust bubble. People are all working towards this vision and mission. They build connection with each other. There's excitement. And you go through a riff and that excitement and trust feels burst. Often companies will go into, well, we got to get people together and maybe we should do something team building focused or something celebratory with our next win. And that just may not feel right. People are struggling with psychological safety. They may feel guilty that they're still there. It's called survivor's guilt. Maybe alumni they're close with and, maybe they haven't been supported. Maybe there's still not transparency coming from leadership on what the plan is from here. So we've seen a lot of mistakes and learnings come from this happening in most tech companies over the last few years. Best thing to do is to prepare way ahead of the big change, knowing it's going to have a negative impact on culture. That's just how it is. And transparent communication goes the longest way. Making sure leadership is super transparent in the announcement of it and what happens after. Making sure people team and managers are going on listening tours, talking to both alumni and current employees, making sure there's additional mental health and well-being resources available for people. Maybe add extra budget for counseling and therapy and your benefits. And then when ready, starting to establish some new rituals or programs that are going to feel good for people. We often convince teams to lean more towards something creative, something well-being focused, something that recognizes like, hey, you've got more on your plate. So let's take this half hour to to do something like a sound bath or a journaling moment, or you know what, we're not even going to do an experience together. We're going to send everyone a recognition gift or kit or card and a prompt to go and do something. Like we saw teams do a picnic challenge in the summer and submit photos on where you had your picnic. I think you could look to like, where do teams make mistakes? It usually happens around some type of change management and maybe it not being managed in the best way. The ripple effects that has on culture is huge.
Certainly. And I think a lot of folks kind of underestimate those things, at least from the outside. You're the expert on this, but it seems like they don't think about that as much. And then they have to call someone like you to help them out.
Yeah. Or, peer groups. Like, I think something I've been so impressed with working in the people and culture space is how much HR leaders rely on their peers and community. We've seen things evolve with managing change, but yeah, relying on your peers and making sure you've got like experts on hand to help when you are going to be going through one of these things, it makes such a difference.
By the way, Shawn, so you mentioned some really fun, cool events like the picnic challenge and things like that. Do you have a favorite type of culture event or activity? I'm just curious.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, I've done so many throughout the years. I think I've really grown to like the like arts-based events. It's such a nice something I can keep and use or like do that craft again in the future. And it is a well-being focused event if you think about it. Use the left side of the brain, take a break from the like typical work week. Our team did you like hand knit a scarf or blanket with like really chunky wool. That was great. I loved that one and picked up a new skill along the way. So that's been really fun. And then some of the cooking ones, whether cooking together in person or virtually, like I love experimenting in the kitchen and trying new recipes and whatnot. So that's some of my personal favorites.
No, those are all great. It's really hard to choose one, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, those are things I like to do outside of work too. So that's where my personal preferences go.
Oh, no, fair enough.
Yeah.
All right. So one thing I kind of wanted to circle back to real quick. So when you're assessing someone to be on your team, how do you assess whether they're a good culture fit for Wavy?
We more look at like culture add, like what are they going to bring that's new to the table? I think not just at Wavy, but like a lot of organizations that we work with, it's like the more diverse in thinking and people, like the richer our culture will be. So, we certainly look for like alignment with our values. Ideally, I want this person to think very differently than me and bring completely new skills and interests to the table and someone that's going to help to enrich that community. But how do you know if someone's going to be a great hire? Digging into questions like scenario-based questions and understanding what will it be like to work together. Something that matters to us is being really solution-oriented. So if you're going through a fake problem in an interview, and their first action item on solving that problem is coming to me to ask me what we should do, that's not a good sign for what it's like to work at Wavy. Ideally, you go to your leader and say, hey, this problem happened. I've already done this. Here's a few ideas I have that I think could fix it or make it even better or whatnot. Do you have any others? What do you think? We really like people to have autonomy on problem solving. And, you still need to socialize those in a responsible way, but solution oriented. Like we want to test for that when we're looking to bring people on. Because we're high quality goofs and like good, quirky, funny stuff, we like to test for some of that when we're interviewing people. Silly scenario-based questions. You have an unlimited budget and you're going to make a documentary on one topic. Like, what's it going to be and where's the screening party happening and who are you bringing? How do you do that sort of thing? Not everyone's going to like thrive with improv, but you get a bit of a better sense of personality and whether they like to have fun with that sort of stuff. So those are some of the things I look at. Let's say we're going all the way to bringing someone on board. I'm big on the reference call. Even if I feel like ecstatic about this person, getting to know like, hey, I'm going to be managing this person now. Like, what do you think I could work on with them in growth and development? And really digging into those. Sometimes reference calls just like a checkbox. But those are like opportunities to learn from the last person who managed this person you're going to be working with. So I dig in pretty deeply there too.
It's an opportunity for you as a manager to learn about that person. It's like a head start or a cheat code, really.
Yeah.
In a way.
And if it's someone you really want to bring on, like you want the real transparent information from their last manager on like, where can they grow? Like, what do they excel at? Like, hey, I'm going to be working with them. Like, what could I help them improve? It's awesome.
All right. So wrapping up, Shawn, this was such a great conversation. Can you give me, if you had to sum up your key takeaways you think people should remember most, what do you think those would be?
Building a company, you're thinking about making hires. Don't hire because it's great to have a bigger team. Hire because you've proven that there is a need for another role on your team. And it doesn't have to be full-time. It could be part-time or project-based. But what exactly is that role going to do to help you reach your goals? I think rooting every hiring decision in that and having alignment between founders, between the leadership team, before you even put that job posting out or share that you're bringing folks on is super important. And you don't have to sprint towards that team growth. That'll happen if you keep rooting yourself and like, do we have the right demand for this? Do we have the right customer? Is our product meeting the needs and value that our customers need? I think all will come to life after that. And don't rush into hiring for like a vanity metric. You need to prove that there's a real need to bring more folks on board.
You know what? I think that everything you're describing really takes a lot of the uncertainty, maybe even the anxiety out of it, brings clarity to the situation so that founders can move forward confidently.
Yeah. And you won't get everything perfect. There will be lots of mistakes made along the way. So act quickly when you know you've made a mistake. Inaction is what kills us. So yeah, I'd recommend acting quickly too. But thanks for having me. This has been a really fun conversation.
No, I'm so glad that you came on. I appreciate the time. Let's wrap up with 6 key takeaways you can apply right away when you're thinking about your first hire and the kind of culture you want to build alongside it. First, your first hire should solve for a real business problem, not just to grow the team. Before you hire, ask yourself questions like, what's breaking? Where are we under capacity? And what growth is being blocked because we don't have enough help? Second, validate the role before committing to a full-time employee. Instead of rushing into a permanent hire, start project-based or bring someone on as a contractor. That way, you can test whether the need is real and if the value justifies making a hire. Third, strong company culture isn't built through big events alone. It's built through consistent rituals. Culture is shaped by day-to-day interactions, so regular touch points are critical to keep people aligned and connected, especially in remote teams. Fourth, radical transparency builds trust and ownership. If you want people to think and act like owners, bring them into the inner circle. Shawn shared that at Wavy, they share real context on what's going well, what's challenging, and where the business is headed. That openness helps people care more about their work and the mission. Fifth, Shawn gave us her 3 C's framework for setting up your employees for success. To do their best work, people need to feel connected to the vision and mission, the purpose of their daily work, and each other. And finally, mistakes happen. If a hire isn't working, act quickly. Inaction is what causes the most damage.
Thanks for listening to Cash Flow and Tell. From all of us at FunThrough, we hope this episode got you one step closer to growing the business of your dreams. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. We'll see you next time.